There he is.
What's up, dude?
How are you?
Man, I'm doing great. Look at that microphone.
Look at it. Do I sound okay?
Dude, you sound like...
Does it sound crispy?
Do you remember the late 90s old Delilah that was on the radio?
Yes.
You sound like Delilah.
Smooth, easy mix 92 for your Friday night, The Quiet Storm. Delilah.
You're riding home with Delilah.
Oh, man. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for doing this.
Dude, absolutely. Absolutely. Look at that office, man. Is that the same office you've been in?
Mm-hmm. I've cleaned up the joint.
Hey, man. Yeah, we had to get who out. Really?
I hope he's listening. We know he's not because he's got more busy. Jordan, we love you.
Yeah, he hates us. It's okay.
Got things to do like rooting for the Mets and planting churches in Queens. So, Nathaniel,
like that.
Dude. So let's just take all of the veil away. Like, we've started recording and it's happening. There's no cute intro.
I don't get any intro music, like no walk-up music.
You got walk-up music, but just that's all then in post. Okay. Yeah, the magic isn't all live. Nathaniel, how long have you been gone from Houston's First? I mean, people may not know this, but you used to work at the Cypress campus of our church. And so what was it, end of 2019?
It was
beginning of 2020.
Yeah, it was the beginning of 2020. So right before, so it's been about 10 years.
Right before everything's got really amazing. Like, there was no problems.
Yeah, no problems. So I've learned I'm just going to stop moving because every time I do, we moved to Houston May of 17. So all my Houstonians, fall of 17 was our great friend Harvey. And then we moved in the beginning of 2020. So I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little
stitious. There we go. So, there's the first Michael Scott reference of many, hopefully.
There you go.
Where are you right now? What are you doing? How long have you been there?
Yeah, so I serve as a student minister at a church here in Grapevine, Texas, called Church at the Cross. So we're right by the DFW airport. That's the easiest way to describe it.
Okay.
We're flown in the DFW, we're 5 minutes away.
Okay.
And so yeah, we're right here where two major highways split, and we've got about 40 acres just right off the side. So this church has been here a while, on this location, 20 years. But before that, it was in a different part of Grapevine. And I've been here on staff for 8 months. Okay. But my wife and I were actually members before I came on staff. So this is the church we were attending when I worked at the convention. And so, they said they needed a student guy. I said no. And
Did you really?
Yeah. And then like 6 months later, I was like, maybe I should put my application.
When did they ask you?
Well, it's kind of like a sidebar conversation.
Because the rest of us were ready for you to get back in local. Yeah, I get it. But like the rest of us were like, this dude needs to be in a local church doing youth ministry.
Yeah. Summer of 21 definitely showed me that.
Yeah. Well, so for those that don't know, you did go to work for the convention at the beginning of 2020, where, I mean, I think we are aware of coronavirus in various forms, but it wasn't like March 2020 yet. So you moved and you went on to work for Duke Camp Ministry, and then you didn't get to do camps.
No. And when we did get 2020, we scratched it off. We held out, man. We held out as long as we could, because we believed in camp ministry. We just don't want to scratch it, but we ended up there was 1 week in like August that we were trying to hold on to, maybe we can make that week happen.
We did the same thing.
But no, we ended up in May canceling everything. So we put together like a little online resource, Camp in a Box type thing.
Yeah.
For our churches. But
what was 2021 like?
It was a hot mess. No, It was great. So that was when our friend Delta came on the scene.
Yeah. Do you know where the home base of Delta was?
I'm gonna probably say that office that you're sitting in.
No. Bay County, Florida, otherwise known as Panama City Beach, Florida. Yeah. So
we went into the season. We knew that there'd still be some limitations on
Sure.
what camp was, and it wouldn't be what we've known it to be before. But no, it very much was 70% occupancy of camps just to give us a little more space.
Yep.
So the first two camps were fine. And then once July 4th hit, once our friend Delta came on scene, then it kind of changed things up a little bit.
Yeah, it was a slippery slope. July was.
Yeah. So we had to shut down one camp a little early, just because out of precaution. But then we were able to finish the rest of the summer out pretty well.
Yeah. We did ours in July 24th, 24th to 29th. Does that sound right? I can't remember. End of July. And we had precautions, and we had statements and plans. And I think the first person came down with COVID like on Sunday morning. And we found out while all of our students are in local churches. And so we tried to pull the ripcord as quickly as possible. And then it's like two people were positive, and then one third, and then a fourth. And then we were like watching it, and we're like, if this turns into 30, I don't know that we can get these kids home, like without putting them all on the buses together. And then it's kind of a mess. And so, yeah, it was by far the worst event in my entire career, as far as like, I don't want to say trauma, but like it was not fun. It was kind of scary at times. And then there was like what people thought about the decisions we made.
Oh, dude, let me tell you something. Being a camp director for camps that had about 5,000 people at them over the summer. And because we had the policy of, if someone in your church tested positive, you went home, like your church went home, plus whoever was in the cabin with you. And we were super gracious. The convention was super gracious to reimburse half of it, depending on what day they went home.
Yeah.
We reimbursed them money back for camp. Yeah. But yeah, let me tell you one nice thing about that is I never had to see those people again. So it wasn't like the parent emails that you get, you're like, I'm going to see them in 2 days.
Yeah.
This was, hey, I'm sorry. I completely understand. We made the best decision that we could in that moment. Use me as a scapegoat. Your churches don't know who I am. Your families don't know who I am. Just say the camp shut down. Blame me. I'll sleep well at night. You get to sleep well at night. Throw me under the bus. We're good to go.
Yeah.
So it was a strong summer.
It's fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
Well, Nathaniel, let's get to the conversation at hand. You are passionate about this idea in youth ministry, which I'll go back and say again, those of us who know you well are really, really glad that you're in a local church doing ministry of some kind. I mean, granted, who would have known what would have happened in 2020, but like, I love that you're with students because you're passionate about this idea of letting students ask hard questions. And here's why that's important. That seems like a really niche thing to talk about today. But as I've done some research, I found that one of the things that we're hearing from like nationwide research, and then as I've like leaned into some students that, I don't know, graduated in like 2014, even I had a couple classes. I was in Arkansas for 7 years, and I ran I ran a project, and I'm still going to try to run it, kind of a little research project. It's just asking students what their youth ministry experience was like. And one of my questions that I asked was, did you feel like you could ask hard questions? Did you feel like you could express your doubts and your fears? Did you feel like you could talk openly about those things? And I felt like I was better than the average guy at saying like, please, please, please bring those to us. And so what I found is that in the research that I'm reading from people like Barna and Impact 360 and Fuller Youth Institute, they're all saying the same thing, that, well, it's important to give kids and students a place to ask those hard questions, to express doubts, but they don't feel like they can. And so for whatever reason, we feel like we have to go the extra mile. My own former students, who I said, like eye to eye with them, like, please let this be a place where you can ask hard questions. And then 10 years later, they're interviewing me and they're saying, man, we just felt like it was disrespectful, or we didn't feel like it was ever the right place. And so I'm still even baffled. And I'm looking back and I'm thinking, man, I thought I was hitting the nail on the head, and I really wasn't. But before we even get to all that, why are you so passionate about that? Why is it important to give students a place to ask hard questions in church?
Yeah, simply put, they're asking these questions anyway. And so they need a space in which they are able to ask these tough questions, um, to get answers from people that they trust and they know. So imagine this. So think back a little bit of when we were in student ministry.
Mm-hmm.
My Sunday school teacher, if I were to ask any sort of question, and I love Miss Joyce, man, she's a saint. She's like 98 years old right now. She had me all the way through. But anytime I asked a question like, how do I know the Bible is true? Like, how do we know? She said, because the Bible says so, that's why. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I guess that's good enough.
Yeah.
Can't argue the trump card of the Bible. I was like, I can't argue with that.
Right.
Or like, how do we know? Like, how do we know these things? And they say a response back was either the Bible says it, or you just have faith. And those were the two answers. And so for me, I went on a journey on my own of those answers. Yes, there's truth in them, but it didn't really help me understand my own faith. These weren't questions of doubting my faith. It was me questions of trying to understand and lay that foundation for myself to be able to ask these questions, and understand what is my faith. Because I think what we personify so much in our minds and just have these ideas of like our students are leaving the faith or when they go off to college because
Right.
they don't they just don't have faith, or there's some mean teacher out there that his whole agenda teaching is just to make them not be a Christian anymore, which there's some of those. I had a few of those teachers. They were kind of off the rocker. But for me, it was when I was in that spot, like if I hadn't already examined myself and asked those questions to seek out these and lay that foundation of faith in my life, I could see why students start to second guess, because there's other things that sound better of the world, but yet when you put them up against scripture, they're not true.
Yeah.
And so creating a space right now where students can learn these things. And what's also super important is you've got to create an environment. Students don't learn the same way that we do. I graduated 15 years ago. It was very heavy lecture based learning. It was the overhead projector. They write down. I write exactly what they're writing. I memorize that, and then I forget it for my test.
Yeah.
I didn't even forget it after the test. I forgot it before the test, which was the problem. And so for our students, that's not how they learn at all. It's very community based. It's very much group projects. There's technology involved. And so students are way more advanced with technology than we are. Not that technology is the devil. Technology can be a great thing when used right. And so we've got to understand and to give students a place to where they can have these conversations. That's all they want to have is a conversation.
Yeah.
And so creating that spot for them is crucial.
Yeah. So I just to hear kind of what you're saying and track it back. First of all, I mean, I think that one of the foregone conclusions of this, like the whole point of this podcast is we're losing our students. I remember the early stats. We're saying that we're keeping a good amount of our middle school students. And then with the advent of like a driver's license, which kids are not getting as quickly anymore. They just don't have a desire to like they used to. But we lose like half of our high school students. And by the time they go to college, we're keeping 10% max, I think.
Yeah.
And so I don't know exactly what that is. I mean, there's plenty of things we can look to. We can say they have the freedom for the first time and they want to flex that. No one's making them wake up early. They've always had, mom wrestling them up or whatever. I was even looking at some of the stats and some people, this is in Barna's research, like 37% of Gen Z are saying like they go to church. These are practicing Christians. I go to church because I always have and because my family does. That's like a third each are saying. And now there's other categories that they can check. The number one is to learn about God, and the number two is to grow in my faith. But like a third are saying, well, because I always have. And there's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of don't ask me why. There's a lot, we hear as parents don't give them the because I said so. But it's so easy for me to flex the because I said so when I just need them, like, I just need you to go to bed. Well, why? I'm not tired. Well, because I said so. But in faith, that doesn't work. And it probably doesn't work for parenting in basic ways either. But the point of what I'm saying is, I remember this is just my own story. I remember there was a lot of beliefs handed to me, and I was very much like, I wasn't going to be a kid who questioned. I'm not going to question authority. They're smarter than me. I don't know the Bible, so what business do I even have, like, trying to debate this person or to ask hard questions? I don't even know what questions to ask. But then I started to learn in my college years, and I went to a Bible school, so like I was inundated with biblical education, and I realized, oh, there's some things here, and maybe I don't agree with all the things that I've been taught. And if I had gone to maybe a public college, that I would have, had occurrences with those professors that you're talking about. But I think for me, one of the things that could have happened very easily was that pastor told me that was true and told me because it was the Bible said so. And there was no why behind it. And I think we probably grew up in a generation of people that were like, the creation evolution conversation was a big one. And so that turned a lot of Christians off to anything involving science. I just have to say, like, I think any Christian that's paying attention has to say, well, we have to live in a world that God has given us laws of science and physical laws. And so for sure he can go beyond those, but we need to start thinking about things in terms of, well, those scientists don't know what they're talking. Let's not do that. So I was really turned off as a college age kid, because a lot of stuff was handed to me. I had to unlearn some things, and then it would have been easy for me. And I think it's easier for the 90% of these college students that we have today. They say just like, well, if they were lying about that, what else were they lying about? And what does this youth pastor know? And does this line up with what I believe? And then it's not popular thought to be like a conservative Christian. And so I would say the deck is stacked against us in this way. Let me ask you this. We know it's important, but how do you do this in your own youth ministry? Like practical, like what does this look like in your youth ministry context?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things I was doing that I thought was good. And then I quickly learned, I was like, man, I'm crushing it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not even playing in the right sport. They're playing baseball. I'm trying to play football. But no, one of the things that has really helped us in this opportunity is teaching in a way that brings these conversations to light, and it normalizes the conversation. It just needs to be a normal part of our conversation. First John talks about bringing stuff into the light. And with that man, these are not things to be ashamed of. If you're struggling in these ways, this isn't something there's no shame in that. One of our church values is we're driven by grace. And so like, this is a place that we understand that the gospel not only saves us, it changes us. So where you are, man, this is part of your working out your salvation. You're locked in now. Let's walk out. What does this actually look like? And so it's so important to normalize these conversations, and even not even put in the stigma of, all right, now here's an awkward topic we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about stress, anxiety, and depression. Like no, like, hey, we all in this room struggle with these things. I struggle with that as a paid Christian, of like, here I am being vulnerable to an extent to let them see I've got to lead out in that way. I have to normalize that conversation, not glorify it to be like, oh, now we're all depressed. No, that's not what it is. It's and so we normalize those conversations by talking about them in a normal way.
And to be able to talk about the fact that, like, hey, I'm not always all together either. Like,
so one of the coolest
stress,
things,
anxiety, and depression.
So one of the coolest things that we started doing is bringing in professionals in these different areas. So kind of talking with our life group leaders, which are our LBS leaders, Sunday school, let's be honest, Sunday school leaders,
Yeah.
getting a feel from what conversations are you having with your students? Okay, now how can we bring in an LPC that's biblically based to talk about these things? And then give the students, so do like a 20-minute, we've done a handful of these now on a couple of different topics they do a 20-minute presentation. And then I sit down with them with the microphone, put my number up on the screen. So that way kids aren't having to ask, because they have questions they want to ask. But if you give them a microphone in front of their peers and say, ask this question,
so
they're not gonna.
You?
So they text me in questions, I filter them. And what that also does, the trick is now I've got their numbers with their questions that I can follow up with now.
Yeah.
So if we weren't able to get to it in the question and answer time, hey, let's grab a coffee and talk through this. Or this is a great question. I have no idea. Yeah. Give me 2 days. Like, you research it, I research it. Let's get together and talk.
I think it's so important for people to practice that. Like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Would you be comfortable if I did some research and got back with you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's super important to be
makes it human.
Yeah. And we don't have to put on the front as staff members of, I've got all the answers, let me tell you what I think. Yeah. No, it's get in. I mean, one of JR, our pastors, one of my favorite quotes of his as of late was, get alone with your Bible, open it up and figure it out. And that's it. That's what I do. That's what students do. And then, hey, you get alone with your Bible, open it up, figure it out. I'll do the same. Let's get together and talk about it. Yeah. All
right. So tell me, so I think this is a strength of yours. And so this is things I can readily see that there's some people that are not as good at this. What would you say if you were, if you're standing in a room full of 100 youth workers and said, here's like some things you need to work on to get better at this? Like, what are some skills that they need to literally work on to be able to think this way, provide these environments?
Yeah. So just a few bullet point things. Mm-hmm. Be okay with the awkward. Embrace it.
It's so good.
You've got to be okay with the awkward.
Yeah.
Sit in it, marinate in it, walk with students through this, because they're on the roller coaster. They've got highs, they've got lows, and you're the seat harness holding them in through scripture, through community. You're not riding the roller coaster with them screaming in the seat beside them. No, you're the comfort in that moment for them. So be okay with the awkward and let them know it's okay.
Yeah.
The next is, man, this has been one that kind of rocked my world. Be a student of students.
That's good.
Be a student of students. You need to be learning, because this generation, man, they change so fast.
They are different, bro.
So different. The lingo, man, I am at that age to where I don't know the lingo. And now I'm like, I've reached that age.
And you sure can't use it. Like, it's not like learn it so that you can use it. Like, please don't. Yeah. It's just like, it's done.
Yeah. That's it. One time I was like, I'm going to try it. I'm going to commit. And let me tell you, you want to know who's honest? Students. They will roast you in a minute.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just kind of the third thing is stop trying to be the professional. Students don't want candid answers that are cookie cutter. Get off. Hey, don't persecute me. Get off Twitter. Quit requoting somebody. Like, I love those guys on Twitter. But here's the thing: I deactivated mine, and it's been the greatest decision I've ever made.
Twitter's a
because it is, dude. It's wild. You find what you're looking for on Twitter. And so, but just stop being the professional. Be real with them. This generation, they've got enough personalities on their screen. They want someone who knows them and cares for them. Yeah. That's what they want. They want that relationship. It's not about you having all the right answers. It's not you being well put together. It's just you loving the Lord, loving them, being an awkward, be a student of them, ask them questions, be a student of students, and quit trying to be a professional.
Maybe that's what it separates the youth pastors who really make a difference from the youth pastors who really just desire a platform. Because I think the platform is very clean. And I think a lot of guys want to be on speaker circuits, or they want to be authors. They want to be popular. They want to be famous. And that's always been true. But the youth pastors that I see that are getting it done, it's afternoon coffee with students after school, and it's awkward conversations, and it's a lot of just walking with them. And for Pete's sake, like, why do we even think that students are going to know these things anyway? We ought to default at, like, we're helping raise them. I mean, if you think about the Orange strategy of partnering with the home and the family to have a greater impact. In some way, I'm 39 years old. I'm an aging youth worker. I really have no desire to do anything else. I love youth ministry. But the older I get, I do kind of have some of that, like, get off my lawn in me. I'm going to start wearing some cargo shorts and some Nike Air Monarchs and cell phone clips.
So you're telling me my Reeboks aren't cool?
But my point is, like, there's a little bit of impatience in me. And so this is a skill I need to work on. Maybe flex that patience muscle a little bit, and then don't expect them to show up like educated. My goodness, like, sixth graders are not educated, and they don't know, and they most likely don't care yet. But over the course of that 7 years before they graduate high school, it's a messy walk. I love this. Quit trying to look like a professional.
Yeah, because here's the thing. If you want to be humbled, ask a student what you preached on 2 weeks ago.
God, I hate that.
But here's the thing. You know what they remember? You showing up to their sporting event.
Yeah.
You know what they remember? You asking them about the test that they had on that Tuesday and how it went. Yeah. That's what students remember.
That's crazy. Sunday, maybe this is not exactly on topic, but Sunday I walked up outside in the lobby to one of our students, and I said, "Hey, Daniel." And he goes, "You remembered my name?" I was like, yeah, I've used your name like a million times. He's like, and he said, "You haven't said my name in the last couple months." And I was like, oh my gosh. Did I walk in and say, "What's up, bro?" or "What's up?" And it's exactly like, I stopped dead in my tracks. First of all, I apologize. Second of all, I was reminded, like, okay, this is what makes a difference. Is that personal touch. Okay, so let me ask you this. We've been talking about the youth ministry side of this, but by and large, right now, I want to invite youth pastors in the conversation, but this has really been for parents of teenagers so far. And so what parents need to think about in this area? I think I'll tell you, like, maybe I'll go first, and maybe I'm stealing your thunder here. But the conversation I keep having with parents is, they're like, oh my gosh, like, my kid said this, what do I do? Like, and it's a freak out mode. So what about parents who didn't go to school for ministry, have never raised a teenager before, and are raising one for the first time? What can they be working on? How can they be involved in this? How can maybe youth pastors equip parents?
Yeah. Parents, you're my heroes. Yeah. Goodness gracious. Absolutely. You are my heroes. So hear this. You're doing a great job. What you are doing, students are notorious for not knowing how to thank you. But they see you and they appreciate you. And so hear that first and foremost. One great piece of advice I would give is, remember back to when you were their age. Because just like you said, Mark, like, you're getting up there in age, man.
Yeah, I am.
And I'm not too far behind. But how quick it is for me to forget middle school Nathaniel, of chili bowl haircut, awkward. My ears were not proportionate with my head.
You hadn't grown into it yet.
Yeah, and the chili bowl really accentuated that attribute of my ears. And I just wanted to be seen. Yeah. And so for parents, know this: if you're a student in middle school, you'll never be more uncool than this moment now. But notice what's important is that I remember, and as a parent, you remember, you're watching your parents, your authority figures, and you kept a mental note of what they were doing.
Yeah.
If they see you engaging in scripture, they're not going to say anything about it, but they're going to put that in the back of their mind. Yeah. They see you, how you treat other people. And what this does is, they're putting in the back of their mind, whenever I have this opportunity for a tough question, one, if they're asking you tough questions, rejoice in that because they trust you.
That's a lot of trust
enough to ask you that question. But two, go on that journey with them. Go on that journey with them. And once again, don't ride the up and down, the freak outs, because here's what you need to know, parents. Students are using terms that they don't fully understand.
It's true.
They have feelings and they have thoughts. And so the best way that they are able to express them through words or things that they've seen. A prime example of this, and sadly it's not a good example of, I was at a camp. The band decided they were going to share their testimony. When they did, it came across as loneliness equates suicidal thoughts. And so after the teaching time, we all go to our life group or our small group breakouts. And all of a sudden I'm getting phone calls from my life group leader saying, hey, so-and-so saying they're dealing with suicidal thoughts. So-and-so says they're doing, and like, it was that peak of, oh no, we've got to do something. We got to, and yes, take those serious, but at the same point, they were just feeling lonely. And so they had heard someone of authority
and some language for it. Yeah.
Gave them some language for it. And so they're just attaching, oh yeah, that's what I'm dealing with. Or, and so parents, so know that just be in the student's life and ask them follow-up questions. Let them process this themselves. If a student comes out with a question out of right field and your first thought is, oh my gosh, what's going on? Ask them, hey, what do you mean by this? Make them put more words to what they're saying.
I guarantee they don't know how to describe it and they don't know what it means. This conversation's already come up on this podcast, and we are not very many episodes in where like these kids are using language that is, I mean, you know, everyone wants to be in on the lingo or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they're using language they've heard. I had this conversation at the dinner table with my 9-year-old. And like, I'm just going to say it. Like, I don't know why I would hide that, but he said, bro, that's gay. And this is my 3rd grader, 9-year-old. I said, son, do you know what that word means? And he said, no, but everyone laughs when my friend says it. And I said, well, here's what that means. And he's like, oh, okay. And he didn't even fully understand what I was getting at. And I gave him kind of a glimpse, but they don't know how to put those two things together. These students, and they don't know how to even articulate the big feelings that they're feeling or the big ideas that they're thinking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so go on that adventure with them and ask those follow-up questions. Hey, what do you mean by when you say this? And here may be the thing. It may not be in that moment that you do that. Let everyone, man, nothing is better for a conversation than a good night's sleep of, hey, let's sleep on it. Let's reconnect again tomorrow. Because what that does is that removes the immediate emotions in the environment that you're at. And in that night, you may be spending all night praying. But give that time, let it sit, let it settle, and then re-follow up within 24 hours that next morning or so. Like, hey, when you said this, I'm just curious, like, what would you mean by this? And then that's when, that's saying, go for it.
That's discipleship. Like that demystifies maybe. And I think we like the idea of, well, we do need to do discipleship. It's like the most important thing we could doing for our kids. We don't know where to start. Like there's no cute starting place. Like you just begin a conversation, and that conversation often turns into other conversations, and you just be there for them. Go on the journey with them. That's it. Like you just said it, like go on the journey with them. That's what discipleship is.
Yeah. And they're going to be asking you these questions your whole life. It's not just in these teenage years. It's whenever they're in their 20s, when they're in college. It's when they're out of college, or if they go to trade school, whatever that may be. These questions are going to keep coming. And so just know that, man, the church is on your side. The church doesn't have all the answers. And also someone that's an untapped resource, they're teachers at school. I call teachers And I have frequent meetings with teachers to be like, hey, I see these students at best 20 hours a month. You see them 20 hours in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing? What's going on? How are you still breathing? That's my biggest question of like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And so parents, the teachers see your students in a new way and can offer fresh input as well. So teachers aren't your enemies. Some of them can be. Man, my kindergarten teacher,
Rough.
She was tough. Mrs. Curtis, I added her. Oh yeah. I was in her
people
class
on blast today.
Yeah, I was in her class for 1.5 days, baby.
I feel like we need to hear the story now. Like, what do you mean 1.5 days?
Yeah.
You got kicked out or she got fired or what?
I was a quiet child. I read books. By the time I was in first grade, I read every book in the elementary library because I just did my homework, sat and just read books. I was terrified of getting in trouble. But that's changed. But I couldn't remember Miss Curtis's name. I had so much anxiety. I was just so nervous about everything. So I asked my friend Curtis sitting next to me. I said, Curtis, what's of all names, Curtis, Mrs. Curtis, should have put those two together. I'm like, hey, what's her name again? And I kept saying the wrong name. I had a lot of speech pathology problems that I couldn't pronounce words right. I was trying my best. And she was just like, if you're in kindergarten and can't remember one name, I said, I'm really trying. Like, I really am trying. And then my mom forgot to put my name on the mat. It still had my brother's name, which growing up in a town of 800 people, there's not very many Nehemiah Kuhnses in that town. That's my brother's name. And so I had his mat, and she's like, that doesn't have your name on it. That's not your mat. I was like, well, it's definitely not his mat because I know his name's not Nehemiah Kuhns. And she said, well, you get to sleep on the ground.
And this is where it all went wrong for you.
This is where I was like, this is where the authority problem started.
This is the origin story.
This is my villain story. Yeah. And so,
oh man,
sleeping on the ground, day one, I went home, told my mom in the most calm voice, I quit school. I'm dropping out.
That's great.
It was like I made up in my mind, this isn't for me.
Bless your mom and every teacher you've ever had. That's great. Well, Nathaniel, just to kind of cap things off, is there anyone you're learning from in this area? Maybe local pastors, authors, thought leaders.
Hey, are you ready for this?
I'm listening.
Grandparents. These are the people that I've learned the most about safe spaces from, because these are people that have lived a life long, full of following Jesus, understand, hey, these storms are a natural thing that are going to come and go.
Yeah.
God's faithful through it all. And so there's nothing more comforting than sitting down. Just think about your own grandparents' house, going and sitting in the living room of your grandparents' house and them asking, hey, how's your day going? That's who I'm learning from in this area of how do I create that in different areas of my life. That even goes with how is my office set up? Is there a desk between me and students when they come in that feels more professional? Or is it more like, hey, here's a couch, come hang out, the mood lighting? When it comes to Sunday mornings, we want a small enough group that students can get their names known. That's the framework that my mind thinks through is grandparents, because those are the people that our students are like, I can't talk to my parents about this, or I'm nervous. Who do they go to?
Yeah.
Grandparents.
And grandparents have seen it and done it and don't freak out.
Exactly.
Wow. That's a great answer. I did not see that coming. Nathaniel, thank you so much for your time, dude. We appreciate you. We miss you around here. And so keep doing what you're doing. And maybe we'll check in for another episode another time. But man, thank you. Seriously.
Absolutely. Hey, if you need a lot of stories of what not to do, boom.
Your
boy is the one.
All right, dude. Well, you have a
All
good
right.
one. Thank you.
All right. Love you, buddy.